Hello everyone, this is Miguel Espinoza. Today's training session will introduce the new workflow for processing the alternatives to TSI assessment requests, or ALT-TSI requests. These requests will be processed between the Advising and Enrollment Services offices. I worked in partnership with a team from both Enrollment Services and Advising to develop this workflow with the intent to streamline the information needed between these two offices to process these requests and to ultimately minimize any kind of registration delays for students. This information being presented today is information that is up to date as of July 28th. As some of you are aware, TCC leadership expanded ALT-TSI use to all FTIC students in response to the interruption of TSI testing due to the COVID-19 shutdowns. In short, ALT-TSI is an alternate means of allowing registration for students without a TSI status. As you can imagine, there will be conditions that must be met by students enrolling in college-level coursework via ALT-TSI, which we'll get into a little bit later. So today's plan is that I will provide an overview of the ALT-TSI workflow and a demonstration of the Smartsheet form that will take the information between Advising and Enrollment Services. Ms. Nancy from Southeast Enrollment Services will be providing an overview of the SDPE data entry and an in-depth demonstration of how to do that via colleague. And then Ms. Carrie Miller, Northeast Academic Advisor, will be providing important advising considerations for talking students through the ALT-TSI path. So we'll go ahead and get started with the workflow overview. So as you can see in the workflow overview, the initiating step will be done by success coaches. Success coaches will identify student candidate eligibility and submit an ALT-TSI form if they find that the student meets the eligibility criteria. This ALT-TSI form will be forwarded to Enrollment Services. Enrollment Services is going to verify the ALT-TSI eligibility provided by the success coach. If approved, Enrollment Services will add an ALT-TSI perk in colleague listing the eligible areas. And then they're going to update the ALT-TSI request status to reflect whether it's been completed, it's been denied, or whether it's been partially completed. That status is then going to, or that confirmation is going to be forwarded back to the original success coach. So that success coach is going to receive the Smartsheet confirmation and document the student superscreen notes section with the status update. And so we do want to try to have a uniform message, something along like Smartsheet confirmation, ALT-TSI perk has been added for, and then list the areas that have been added. And then the idea is that when a student goes to meet with an academic advisor for their first time advising session or their course plan session, the advisor is going to verify that the perk status has been added in colleague. So they're looking for that perk status that was added by Enrollment Services. That's the indicator that that student is ready to register via ALT-TSI. Or at least it's your indicator to let you know that the student is eligible for that. You're going to review the ALT-TSI document, which is a fillable PDF form that the student must review and sign. Again, just to so we can have something to show that the student is aware of the conditions for the ALT-TSI pathway. And with that on file, on record, then that will let the academic advisors to go ahead and add a course level SDPE. This registration approval, this SDPE, will allow the student to register for those TSI restricted courses. So again, that is a general overview of the workflow of how to submit ALT-TSI requests.
Hello, everyone. This is Carrie Miller, Northeast Advisor. So what we want to point out before we go into the ALT-TSI chart is that it's important to note you are not granting a TSI exemption for the student based on the ALT-TSI path. A permanent exemption such as the SATs or the ACTs allow the students to register in college level classes without having to take the TSI test. This alternative TSI is a temporary pathway that allows the students to register for a college level class without having to sit for the TSI assessment. So it is important to note that this is a temporary pathway allowing them to register, but they will have to take the TSI test before the end of the first semester if they register for a standalone college level course. I'm going to let Miguel go into and explain the chart for you, and then we will answer some frequently asked questions here in just a moment.
Thanks, Carrie. So this is something that success coaches need to be very familiar with, as well as advisors. For success coaches, please be aware that the priority as far as when should you use this as a tool will be after you have verified that the student does not qualify for those long-standing TSI exemptions that, again, that are already exist, such as SAT, ACT, or STAR EOC scores. So if the student doesn't qualify for any of those, then your next step will be to see if the student qualifies for the ALTSI path, these that are listed here. If a student does not qualify for any of these ALTSI paths, then the student will be required to take the TSI assessment before registration can occur. So again, your priority as far as when to use this tool will first be to check and verify if the student satisfies any exemptions, TSI exemptions. If not, then you can use ALTSI paths. And if ALTSI paths are not an option, then will you go ahead and proceed with the TSI assessment referral system. Okay, so the first path that you can use are going to be based on high school grades. So you can have high school graduates or dual credit students. Let's look at high school graduates. So for high school graduates, there is a prerequisite, if you will, that the student must have a cumulative GPA of 85% or higher. If the school system is using a 4.0 grading scale, then you're looking for a 3.0 or higher. And if you have a school using a 5.0 grading scale, then you're looking for a 4.0 or higher. So once this prerequisite has been satisfied that the overall GPA meets this threshold, then can you go ahead and look into each TSI area to see if the student satisfies either of these areas. So let's start with reading and writing. So the grade for a high school graduate, or the class for high school graduate that you're looking for, is English 4. For English 4, the student must have a final grade of 85 to 100. If they have that, then that student can be placed into English 1301 or any TSI reading restricted course. For math, we're looking at students who have a pre-calculus grade of 85 to 100. Students who meet this requirement can then be placed into standalone college algebra, business algebra, contemporary math, or statistics. If the student only took Algebra 2 or did not meet the pre-calculus threshold, but their Algebra 2 grade is between 85 and 100, then the student can place into Math 1332 or 1342. However, this one will require the co-requisite model enrollment. So they will have to enroll in the 0132 or the 0142 co-requisite courses, depending on which one they choose. So now if we look at dual credit students, they also have the same prerequisite, if you will, overall GPA of 85, 3.0 or 4.0 higher. The difference will be in the reading section. As you can see, we can use their English 2 or their English 3 grade. As long as they have an 85 to 100, then they also have no reading, writing restrictions for TSI. In the math section, please note that we can only use their pre-calculus grade. So if they have the 85 to 100, then they can place into the standalone courses listed here. Note that dual credit students are not eligible to take developmental courses. So because of that, that automatically makes them ineligible to take the co-requisite model courses, which are only available to Algebra 2 students. Therefore, Algebra 2 is not an option for students who are currently dual credit. So that's an overview of the high school grades. You can also use test scores. So we can use GED scores, HESI scores, and PSAT scores. And again, all of these have a requirement. So the prerequisite is that on the GED, for example, they must have a minimum score in all parts of 145, which is actually the requirement for them to even complete their GED. So as long as they have a GED, this should already be met. So then when you're looking specifically at which area of TSI they may be eligible for an ALTSI, you're looking at a reading and writing score of 165 to 174 and a math score of 165 to 174. So the same score range for reading, writing, and math. And as long as they meet these requirements, then they can place into any reading, writing, and any of these math classes. Again, standalone math classes. For HESI scores, there's a composite score of 45 that's required. And then you can look again at individual TSI areas. So for reading and writing, they would need an 8 and an essay score of a 2 so that they can place into any reading, writing restricted courses, and a score of an 8 in math to place into these standalone math courses. PSAT, I just want to point out that if you're using test scores prior to October 15, 2015, they do have a score composite requirement of 107, and then their corresponding cut scores for reading, writing, math. But if you have test scores, PSAT scores, as of October 15, 2015 and on, then there is no composite score requirement. They just need to meet the individual TSI areas for reading, writing, math. So again, I just want to reiterate what Carrie mentioned earlier, which is placement in any standalone course will require that those students take the TSI assessment before the end of the semester. So all of these standalone courses here and the reading, writing courses are all standalone. So students enrolled in any of those courses will be required to take the TSI assessment before the end of the semester. Okay, so with that, I will now move on to going over the ALTSI form that will be submitted by success coaches to enrollment services. So again, this is going to be when you've identified a student as a candidate and they do meet the requirements. You want to fill out the ALTSI request form. So the form will be listed in this list. So there will be an ALTSI form listed here, and that's how you'll access the actual form. So this is the form, ALTSI request form. At the top of the form, I went ahead and listed all of the prerequisites once again for reference and all of their prerequisites. Here you will enter a student's 7-digit colleague ID, enter the student's first and last name, and then this checkbox here is basically stating that you have verified that the student meets at least one of those requirements above. So, if you're doing the high school grades, then you have verified that the 85 to 100 has been met, and so on and so forth. So you want to check that box. And by doing that, it'll then pop up the next question, which is now asking you to specify which particular pathway you're requesting or you verified for the student. So if we're saying high school grades, select high school grades. Upon doing that, it's going to prompt you to select what area in math, or what's the specific eligibility criteria for math. As you can see here, it shows you each and every math eligibility or cut score, if you will. But obviously, if you selected high school, please select the corresponding high school grade criteria, whether it's Algebra 2 or whether it's pre-calculus. There's a note, just a reminder here, that Algebra 2 is not to be used for dual credit students. So you would know not to use this one. Just a reminder. So we'll just go with pre-calculus. And now it's going to ask you for the reading and writing eligibility. So again, it shows you all of the reading and writing cut scores for scores or for high school grades. Select the corresponding one. Just note that if the student did not meet the requirement, you can just select not requested. By saying not requested, it's exactly that. You're not requesting an ALTSI for reading and writing. Now this could be because the student did not meet the requirement, or it could also be because the student already met a TSI exemption via SAT scores or ACT scores or something else. So you wouldn't be requesting the reading and writing, you'd only be requesting math in this example. The request your comments allows you to put in any kind of comments or any kind of information that you think will be important for enrollment services to be aware of. My recommendation would be to just indicate, if you said pre-calculus, to just say pre-calculus grade of 91. This will allow the registrar's office or enrollment services that when they get this, they know exactly what they're looking for when they're verifying, what you submitted. So then they can go into the transcript and Laserfish and verify, oh yeah, pre-calculus, yes, the student did make a grade of 91. So then they can, again, it's another set of eyes to verify what you saw and to confirm it, and then be able to process the request. Finally, there is an area for uploading. Just keep in mind, there really shouldn't be any need to upload anything through here. Any transcripts, any scores, anything like that that you use, all of that information should be in Laserfish. So there should be no need for you to attach anything. It's important to note that we must have official documentation on record in order to process these ALTSI requests. And then the final step on this is to just select so if we're going to select Northeast or Southeast Campus, submit it, and it goes off to the Enrollment Services Office, where again, if you remember from the overview, they will then verify all the information, add the ALTSI perk, send it back to you, the success coach, who will then document SuperScreen. So that when the student is presented to an advisor, the advisor will have that documentation in SuperScreen and know that this is an ALTSI student and finish the process or the ALTSI workflow and to allow for registration. Okay, so once again, just a quick reminder, to access the form, it will be listed here for you to access it along with all these other pre-existing forms that we've been using since COVID. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce Ms. Nancy Segovia, Southeast Campus Enrollment Specialist, who will present an overview and an in-depth demonstration of the SDPE data entry that advisors will be performing to allow for registration in TSI restricted courses.
Thank you, Miguel. What you see in front of you is the screenshot for the SDPE screen. One thing that I do want to make clear is that this is not an override and you are not granting a petition for the student. This is granting permission or approving registration in a course for the student. So what you see here is the SDPE screen. And these are the 4 steps that you'll need to process on this screen. And this is the perk screen. So when advisors, before they go into the SDPE screen, they'll have to go to the perk screen and look for this restriction right here, the ALTSI. And the ALTSI is going to have an end date, of 10/18/20, which is the date before the spring registration begins. So what we'll do here is click on the paper icon, and we're going to copy the message, and then move on to the SDPE screen. Okay, so here this student has not had a petition granted for the 2020 fall yet. As you can see, the last petition that was granted was 2018 summer. So in this case, I need to create one for the fall. So here I'm going to add A for add, and then enter or open. Next, you're going to type in 2020 FL, tab over. When you tab over, the dates are going to automatically populate. So you do not change the dates here, and move on over to the course field. Here, we're going to say if your class is Math 1342, then you'll just enter 1342. What we're going to be looking at here are the dates, are the courses without an end date. So these here should not be selected ever. If you select these, students will not be able to register. So the two that we're looking at are here. So if it's a math with the COREC, then it will have a Y under the House Bill 2223. So if you want to do COREC, you'll select 2, and if you want to just do the standalone 1342, you're going to select 1. So let's say that if you do select a COREC, keep in mind that you also have to add the second course. You're always going to leave the section field blank and move on over to the faculty consent status field, where I will put or enter A, tab over, select the paper icon again, and use the timestamp, and then paste the comments that you copied from the perk screen. This is very important too. If you want to add any additional comments, please feel free to do so. Save. And because I did select a 1342 with the COREC, then I must go ahead and enter the second course, which is 0142. So it would be option number 1. So I'm looking for the ones where the end date is blank. So I can double click. Same thing, move over to the faculty consent status field, which is the second one. Enter A, timestamp, and I'm going to once again paste the comments that I copied from the perk screen and save. This is what it's supposed to look like. And you can save and update. Now, sometimes you'll see students with that may already have the SDPE already completed for the fall. For instance, this student here already has the 2020 FL. So instead of creating another one, just select the 2020 on file. So he already has a History 1301. Let's say that I want to add, let me see, a government class. And I want to do a standalone. Again, I'm only looking for the ones that the end date is blank. So I'm going to select a standalone government 2305. You'll notice too that there's honors. Of course, we're not going to select the honors. Timestamp, very important to use a timestamp, and then paste the comments from your perk screen. And save and update. That concludes the SDPE instructions.
Okay, so we do want to address some important points about the ALTSI path. There is a frequently asked questions that will be included in the packet that you are receiving. So I'm not going to read through all of it, but a couple quick points that we want to go over. Once again, please remember that this is a temporary pathway to allow registration for students. Since they are not sitting for the TSI test prior to registration, they will not have a TSI status on file. Therefore, it is important to note that STSC is required for all students who use the alternative to TSI pathway. The alternative to TSI pathway is for FTIC students. STSC is required. The ALTSI can be used for one section only. So let's say a student has an SAT exemption for reading and writing, and they qualify for math based on the ALTSI. They can use that with the understanding that for the math TSI, they will have to sit for the TSI test prior to the end of the first term, unless it is a co-rec section, keeping in mind that they do have to pass the co-rec with a C or better, or they will have to also sit for the TSI. Once again, if they are registering for a standalone college level course, they are required to take the TSI prior to the end of the first semester. Honestly, we would recommend that they take the TSI prior to the start of registration for the spring semester. That can help them advance to the next class, for instance, a reading class, once they have passing TSI scores on file. Also, for those students that register for a co-rec statistics or a co-rec contemporary math, they are not required to take the TSI test because they are in a co-rec. However, if they do not pass the co-rec with the C or better, they will be required to test. Once again, reviewing quickly, temporary pathway to allow students to register. For FTIC students, STSC is required. The ALT-TSI can be used for one section only. A standalone college level class requires testing, and a co-rec statistics or co-rec contemporary math requires that you pass the class with a C or better or be required to test by the end of the first semester. I'm going to turn it back over to Miguel.
Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Nancy, for all the information you provided. And just for a quick point of clarification on the areas that you can use it in, you can select to use it in just one area or all areas. But the main thing is that I think most people are concerned whether they can use it in just a single, just math or just reading and writing. Yes, you can. But if the student is eligible for all areas, then you can use it in all areas as well. Again, I provided an overview previously of how this will work. In the FAQ section, there's also specific instructions, if you will, or guidelines for success coaches on what to do. Again, the priority order for TSI placement will be TSI exemptions, then ALT-TSI, and then the TSI assessment. So verify if the student has any exemptions on that can be used. If not, then see if they qualify for any ALT-TSI path. And if not, then would you go ahead and refer for TSI testing. It is a good idea or it's strongly encouraged that success coaches go ahead and go over some of those conditions with students, and they're listed here, such as the TSI assessment will still be required before the end of the semester for standalone courses. Student registration will be blocked for future semesters until there's a score on file. We're trying to encourage students to register with as few barriers as possible. So this is information you want to share with the student so that they can make an informed decision. If you go over this information, student approves and they're okay with it, go ahead and submit the ALTSI form, and that'll initiate the whole process moving forward, so that you don't have to worry about sending the student to testing if they chose to go through the ALT-TSI pathway. And then again, check your emails to make sure if you get an update from a request you previously sent, that you, as quickly as possible, update that student's SuperScreen notes so that when the student meets with an advisor, the advisor will have that confirmation on file through SuperScreen. For academic advisors, again, the main takeaways is to check that the ALTSI perk flag has been added and go over the ALTSI student agreement form, which I have included on here a sample of what that looks like. Fill it out, have the student initial each of these statements to acknowledge, so that they can acknowledge that they read and understand the conditions for using ALTSI. And then with that, you can then go ahead and finish course planning and provide the SDPE registration approvals and colleague for each course that you're placing them, for each TSI restricted course you're placing them into. So hopefully this provided you with some more information and a clearer understanding than what you had before as far as what ALTSI is and how and when to use it. If you do have any questions, I do recommend that you send those to your respective coordinators, assistant directors, whatever the workflow is within your own departments, and send those up to your corresponding leadership in your campuses. And if we can all, provide updates to any information that we have on this form, if we have updates, we'll make sure to share that with y'all as well. Nancy, Carrie, is there anything else that y'all would like to add before we conclude this session?
No, sir. Sounds good, Miguel.
That's it.
Great. All right. Well, again, everybody, this is Miguel Espinoza, Ms. Nancy Segovia, and Ms. Carrie Miller. And again, we hope that you find this information helpful. Thank you for joining us.